Interesting. And then people look at things like moral non-naturalism. So things like kind of Platonic forms or God is the classic example. And then often people say that obviously these things will have been prior to kind of sentient conscious creatures kind of coming into the scene, and they'll potentially still be here if sentient conscious creatures come off the scene as well, because they're held in a different place than kind of us needing to be the arbiters or the ones that uphold them. They're either Platonic or they're God or something like that. So would you mind kind of breaking down into that? So is it, am I right when I say that for the moral non-naturalist, they could argue that their morality is true no matter of the moral practitioners witnessing it?
Yes, certainly some forms of non-naturalism would say that, and they might take that as some kind of, however small, intuitive tick against their view. So we think that it's always been wrong to peel skin off babies, right? And if we just disappeared, although it doesn't make sense to talk about babies when we all disappear, but if we disappeared, it would still be wrong to peel skin off babies. How can that be true? Well, because it's something to do with forms or God's will or something else. So yes, that would be true. For some non-naturalist views, they would say that these things would be, the rightness and wrongness, whatever, would exist independent of us. So therefore would carry on existing.
And kind of divine command theory is something that is kind of used in this space quite a lot. Someone like William Lane Craig would be a proponent of that theory. There's a sort of dilemma that's sometimes pitted at the sort of foundation of this, a sort of ontological versus epistemological conundrum almost, or dilemma. So it's the Euthyphro's dilemma, which is very classic, that the question is, does God decree good actions because they are good, or are good actions good because they are decreed by God? I thought it'd be quite cool just to dive into that a little bit with you today, Andy. Would you mind exploring that for us and breaking it apart?
Sure, absolutely. So I just rehearse that a little bit and then talk about whether I think it's a good challenge or not. So if you think about why do people introduce divine command theory? So they would introduce it in terms of theoretically because it supposedly helps explain why things are right and wrong. Right? Just explain it. It's right because God commands it's wrong. That's great. Okay, so then this Euthyphro dilemma says, well, there's two options here, right? Is something wrong because God says it? So he sort of makes it the case by simply diktat, right? Just makes it the case. That's one option in this. Or the other is that he is essentially a brilliant tracker of truth. He's omniscient in classical conceptions of God, so he just knows. So the reason God says that giving money to charity is right is because, as a matter of fact, it is right, and he's just telling you this fact. He knows better than anyone else. Okay, so they're the sort of two options in this space, seemingly. Problem is, both got problems. Take the latter one first, which was God is just a good tracker of what's right. But notice when I introduced this, I said the reason it's introduced is to explain why, as a matter of fact, these things are right and wrong. But now I haven't. I've just told you God's good at getting it right. So in some sense, you think, well, it's not doing why we want to introduce it at all. You've just said God's really good at getting it right, and that hasn't explained what we wanted to know, what makes it the case. Okay. And also, that challenges God's sovereignty. So classical theism says, let's not have that. Other option is things are right and wrong just because God says. Okay, so the challenge there is that makes morality seemingly arbitrary. If God commands tomorrow it's okay to kill reality TV stars, then it would be, right? That's a bit controversial, but maybe you think it is. Or if someone phones you before 9 in the morning, it would be right to set fire to the house or something, right? Then it would be. And you could just ramp up the examples. Now that looks really problematic, right? If your divine command theory means that what drops out of the bottom of that is any seemingly heinous moral crime could be okay, if God just decides to make it command you to do that, someone to do that, then that's problematic for that theory. Now, just a quick note on that, and I'll talk about why it's perhaps not as bad as we might think. And the point here is that some people, if you talk to your religious friends about this, they're going to say, well, God is love. God's a good moral agent. He just wouldn't go around saying, peel skin off babies today, sacrifice your son tomorrow, give money to charity the day after. He's consistent. He's loving. The problem is when you try and spell what that means out, it looks like you're going to have to rely on moral stuff. So if you say, well, God wouldn't do that because he's consistent. Consistent in what way? What you really are saying is he just gets it right, what as a matter of fact is right and wrong, and then you're back in the first camp. So it looks like applying to the moral attributes of God is not going to help you because he makes it the case. So he's either constrained by something external to himself, or morality seems arbitrary. So that's the very, very broad brushstrokes. That's the challenge. And lots of people have said lots about it. One of the responses Richard Joyce has got a really nice paper on this discussion. And although I don't think he said he's a supporter one, no, he's not a supporter of divine command theory. He's got a nice point, which is if you think that God's commands and rightness and wrongness is an identity claim, right? So it's actually just one and the same thing, right? God's commanding something to be wrong, just makes it wrong. That's that relationship. It's just an identity. Then we can say, well, look, for other identities, we don't have because questions. So remember that Euthyphro came in because we said, is it wrong because God commands it? Does God command it because it's wrong? So, for example, water is H2O. Is it water because it's H2O, or is it H2O because it's water? Ooh, just go, well, they're just one and the same thing, right? Yeah. So the thought is if you can, not all identities motivate because questions. And if the divine command theory is meant to be an identity, then you may be able to sidestep Euthyphro worries.
If you enjoyed this clip, then head on over to Locals to access the full conversation right now. Supporters can access the video version and everyone can access the audio-only version of the conversation. I'll see you over there.